Welcome to the Board of Equalization meeting for Utah County. To start the meeting, we have Commissioners Lee and Commissioner Gardner. Commissioner Stakovich is not feeling well, so he will be excused from this meeting. I think I've done BOE before, but we don't worry about anything on consent, right? We just go through each item.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Sure.
That's what I remembered.
Suspend the rules.
What was that?
Suspend the rules.
Oh, right. We will have to suspend the rules so that I can second motions, as there are only two commissioners here. So as we go through, we will have, I won't say that each time, we'll just have a suspension of the rules so that we can second motion. With that, let's get started.
Okay. I'll make the first motion that we approve the minutes of the Board of Equalization as stated in number 1.
And I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 2-0. All right. Item number 2. So this is to approve or deny new applications for property tax exemptions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This was continued from the April meeting.
I think we're doing
Vicky's
it for
online. Vicky.
Oh, okay.
It was a prorated, right? That we were
Yeah,
looking
it
at.
is prorated from the date of building permits. Vicky, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm promoting her to panelist. Also, Kelly Taylor from the church is also online as
Perfect.
well.
Okay.
That was part of it too. We wanted them to.
That was why it was, I remember that's why we
Yeah.
did that, because there wasn't anyone here representing.
They have to accept the promotion, though. Maybe they don't want to be promoted.
Either one will work, or both.
I'm trying to get Adam, Vicky, and Kelly to all accept a promotion, but they just apparently like where they're at. Oh, there we go.
Adam did. And Kelly.
I hope Vicky's at her desk.
If Vicky is not able to, can you mention her portion of it for us, Bert?
I would like to, except I don't remember, unfortunately.
Maybe Kelly
But I think-
remembers.
Well, I think
Kelly's-
if- with Kelly Taylor here, she can probably explain what these are for and how the churches put them into use. And I think Adam's probably got the legal side covered if there's any questions there. So
All right, Kelly, do you want to unmute yourself and maybe explain to us what these parcels are for and what the usage is? Can they hear us online?
unmuted. You're muted. Yeah, that's the problem.
Okay.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You
So
can
maybe
press
they can't
star
hear us.
6 to unmute.
All right. Can you guys hear us? Adam, can you hear us?
Try start.
So I cannot hear you on Zoom, but I can hear you on YouTube.
Okay.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone.
So if
You can
anyone
press
is
star 6.
on Zoom only, they won't be able to hear you.
We could move forward with other items if we need to.
Let me dump Sally and have her come back in. That is the problem. Sally, I want you to close out. Yeah, I want you to call and come back in. Yeah, you're up.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. You have joined the meeting as an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting. The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press *6. The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press *6 to unmute.
Let's move on to the other items for people that are here. Do you want to just let the people maybe in the chat box, let them know that while we get that fixed until they can hear us and we can hear them? All right, so we'll skip over item number 2 for now and we'll come back to that. Item number 3, approve or deny an application for review by the Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act for the Bowman Family Trust.
Goodbye.
Do we have anybody here for that?
I'll introduce this one really quickly, Commissioners. As you may recall, this is a greenbelt application where the applicant did not have sufficient acreage to satisfy the 5-acre requirement.
Right.
So it was one that we talked about using as a guinea pig for our newest efforts in urban farming. And so the matter has been continued a couple of times. I'm not sure if the Bowman family is here, but
I'm concerned that, sorry, Ben, did we notify them that we're likely to continue this again? So I think that's why they're not here today.
Okay,
perfect. And that was going to be our recommendation, was that we just continue this one again. The county is not ready to fully implement urban farming yet. We're working with IT and the assessor's office and various departments throughout the county to try to put together the logistics to make that migration possible.
right, I had thought we didn't have that application up yet. So is that just item number 3? Is that items 3 and 4?
3 and 4, I believe, is the same situation. Is that right?
Okay,
So, yeah, staff's recommendation with those two would be we would recommend that we continue that to the next meeting.
Welcome to Zoom.
Okay.
Enter your meeting
Make the
ID.
motion then that we continue items number 3 and 4 till our next meeting,
I'll
which is
second that.
going to be what? June 23rd.
okay, I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Enter your participant
That
ID
passes
followed
2-0
by
to
pound.
continue items
Otherwise,
number 3
just
and
press
4.
pound. Continue. You have joined the meeting as an
Until
attendee and will be
June
muted
23rd.
throughout the meeting. The host would like you to unmute your microphone.
It looks like they might be able to now. We're looking. Should we keep going or are we close to figuring this one out? Vicky's on.
The problem is they won't be able to hear all our audio goes.
Okay. Let's go to item number 5, approve or deny an application for review by the Board of Equalization for Farmland Assessment Act for the
You are
Dew,
unmuted.
Bradley, Raymond, and Lisa Ann.
Okay, so this one was taken off Greenbelt because there was not the 5 acres. And so we had discussed previously if he could be eligible for urban farming. Currently, he can't because it's dry tillable and urban farming is only irrigated land. But Mr. Dew and I had a conversation before this meeting going over a bunch of different scenarios that he's looking at. He has possibilities to pipe in some irrigation where we could reclassify it and he could still stay below the 5 acres and go urban farming. Or he also has a possibility of an opportunity to purchase a 1/4 acre that's adjacent to his. So it
Okay.
would bump up his acreage and he could then do farmland assessment. He is getting some steers that he's placing on the property, but currently he can't qualify for either because the acreage for greenbelt and the land classification for urban farming. So those were the things we discussed. So he's going to look through what he wants to do.
Yeah, do you know about how much time you would need for either one of those?
Commissioners, in addition to what Ms. Garcia said, I am trying to pursue all the options that she just articulated. I'm also trying to understand in the prior approvals, in February when I was here, I didn't probably recognize the fact that the prior owner to our purchase made the requests and had multiple approvals based on animal unit months. And so curious why I would not be able to continue on the animal unit months. And basically just today found out from Ms. Garcia that I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me, that effectively what she said is, well, we probably shouldn't have approved it before, even though there were multiple, so there's a history of multiple approvals. And so I'm curious, as I pursue all of the options that have just been described, is there an option that the animal units on the existing property without the additional land, where I'm at 5.26 acres, is that one of the options, or is the admissions of the assessor's office that, well, we made a mistake and we shouldn't have approved this before, that totally takes off the option of animal units on the existing property as it's established and hasn't changed from the transaction from the prior owner to myself. Does that question make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so to clarify that, I explained to Mr. Dew that as time has progressed, we have gotten better tools for the assessor's office to do those kind of things. We now have aerial photography where I can measure those home site values, those home site acreages, whereas, back in 2008 or whenever, we did not have that. We also get aerial photos every other year, so it's not sometimes as current when an application comes in for me to scrutinize it. Also, when I get 300 applications in a month, I don't have time to look at every parcel as good as I'd like to, and so it's when I come across them. Ultimately, it is the owner's responsibility to meet the requirements, to know if they have acreage and to know if they're producing agricultural products. And then they sign the application saying, yes, I'm meeting these requirements. So we don't look at every application as closely as when we're going through and doing audits and different things like that. So it is possible the previous owner didn't have the acreage and didn't meet the qualifications, but they got the benefit. And I can guarantee you that is happening right now on many parcels within the county. So anyway, but now that we have better tools, we have some ability now to measure those things and to look at those things, we can become more accurate.
But the denial on it is based off of acreage,
Yes.
not off of production.
Well, it was originally based off acreage, and then when he came into the meeting and he said he wasn't able to produce anything because he couldn't get the irrigated water and that he was struggling to get production because he was relying on water, that he has water rights, but he has no delivery system right now to get it. But the original was acreage. The previous owner had livestock in the notes that I have back from when they did an application. So, which is, I think, why Mr. Dew is going for that right now while he's working on getting better irrigation.
So if the acreage is increased to make that 5 1/4, and the livestock are there for production purposes on an AUM basis, then it would qualify.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, we went over all that. He now knows how the AUMs are calculated based on which type of livestock you have. I've given him the state code and standards of practice and things so that he can make his business plans and management based on his resources and what he wants to do.
If I might clarify slightly, in the original appeal, I understood the questions of prior production, and I translated those questions as actual crop production, and I had no idea the actual crop production of the prior owner. I didn't recognize that the production portion of the prior owner was based on animal units. And so I had indicated that I couldn't validate a 2020 production, when in fact most likely the actual production for the prior owner was animal units, and I didn't even ask those questions. And so I probably didn't have all the information that I needed to be able to present prior production in the appeal. So I would present the fact that I believe that the property was in full production based on prior approvals and the actual animal unit months. And I can only attest to the fact that I didn't have animals, and I was working on actual crop production in 2021 when we moved in. And so I can attest from that time forward. I believe, though, with the year stipulation of lack of production, I'm within that range and will have the animal units. Part of my question, to come back to your question to me, Commissioner Gardner, is as I pursue those options, there's a precedent of multiple approvals on the existing property with animal units without an additional purchase of ground. And does that precedent have any impact in my case for those prior approvals? And as I mentally consider the rollback tax request, there was an approval within the 5-year window of that tax, which I think, okay, that's interesting that,
Yeah, that is.
that within a 5-year request of rollback tax, there was an approval in 2018 and 2008 and prior to that. So as I pursue a potential urban farm option, a potential additional land purchase acquisition, and the various options I have so that I could answer your question, how long, does the precedent of the approvals and the animal unit production on the existing parcel, does that count for anything in this Board of Equalization?
Paul, you're going to have to help me on the legality there, but
Yeah, we've experienced some of this in the past. I've personally argued made these arguments before the State Tax Commission, and there's really no precedential value in previous approvals. Again, we're not bound to our previous decisions to approve something, and to hold that would say that the board could never fix a wrong, right? You can never correct a wrong. So, my legal opinion is that no, there really is no binding precedential value on a previous approval.
if Commissioner Lee and I feel that if that sways our opinion that there has been an approval in the last 5 years, and we know that he's looking towards rectifying this one way or the other, legally, are we able to give an exception for a year?
You can't give an exception based on acreage there are some exceptions in the code, but I don't think this situation doesn't trigger any of those exceptions. The exceptions in the code for acreage would be, if you have some other 5-acre parcel that you're working in, this smaller parcel is a significant or an essential, I can't remember if it's significant or essential aspect of that operation. That's
Right,
really the only grounds you can really Or if there's like eminent domain or something like that, or if it's 80%
Some of
of
the
your
land
income.
was taken via eminent domain,
Yeah, yeah, but
just that the yard is bigger than they had said it was.
yeah. Trying to fix this problem now in the way that we're talking about is sort of interesting.
Now, we
And-
could do the rollback and then give an abatement in a commission meeting, right?
Yeah, you do have that option.
So this is kind of how I see it, and you correct me if I'm wrong in this assessment with it. I totally get it that you can't go back, for a previous owner and pull up records or anything of that nature on what they, especially when it comes to production. If that was in 2020, is that correct? 2020?
So of the prior 2 years, the prior owner was 2020 and part of 2021.
Part of 2021?
Right.
So I get that, and we have to. I think that we have to assume, just from the past history on production, that was intact. So if I assume that that's intact and that's off the table, then we have to look at it in the sense of from the time you picked it up in 2021 moving forward. And as far as Diane, correct me if I'm wrong in it too, but I think the resting on this usually comes from crop rotations. Is there a resting period for cattle on a cattle rotation? I don't. Is there? I don't know. I've never heard of that. That's the reason why I'm wondering if it's a cattle one or if it's if there's a severe drought or if you're
Like if the grass
replanting,
needs-
you're
yeah,
redoing
the
it.
grass.
It's kind of more on an agricultural basis, with crop, not
So
necessarily
you're talking
a
about
rest.
like the 1-year waiver.
The 1 year waiver.
Okay, so the 1-year waiver is usually for a flood, a fire, something, beyond your control. An asteroid lands on your land and messes it up, okay? So things beyond your control. If you have dry tillable land, which is what he has, there's a practice where you plant in the fall and you accumulate the moisture, and oftentimes dry tillable land, they alternate, so they get a crop every other year.
Right.
So there's that. I can't think of what other exception. If you're in a certified crop rotation program, that's a CRP. That's with the Farm Service Agency and the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So that's an actual program where you sign paperwork. They help you figure out how to better utilize your land, how to, capture water and stuff. So that's just not saying I'm going to rotate. That's actually being in a program. So that would qualify.
We don't have anything in the way of cattle rotation.
Yeah, there's
That's
anything
that's
that I
similar
can
to
think
that.
of for animals. That's
Okay, so with that, the one thing that I can't step past though is the acreage part. Now the acreage part, if we're less than that 5 1/4 acres, I mean we're less than the 5 1/4 acres that's needed and necessary. So until that's kind of cured, I don't know how we proceed forward. Unless we try to put it into the urban farming, and I don't know what your desire is, but I feel like we're flexible enough to say what do you want to do as we move forward. But personally, I can't step past the 5 1/4 one and say good to go, because the problem is as soon as you move that line, then we have to move that line for everybody.
Sure.
And that's a law that we have in place that I'm not comfortable with just moving. Well, I mean. We shouldn't. Let's just put it that way. It's a tough one. If there was some discretion in there where we said, the boundaries are off and maybe this over here should be part of it, that's a whole different story. But in this case, it sounds like there's just not 5 1/4 acres, period.
He has 5.26.
So there's 5.26.
He does have
Oh,
5.26. It's
but
just that
I
his
do
Five
have-
in production, sorry.
it's just that his yard is bigger than a 1/4 acre.
So from the assessor's office, the home and landscaping make it so that there's not 5 acres of
Got it,
production.
okay.
So my intent is to preserve the agricultural purpose and intent, and to continue to grow as much and to comply with the animal unit months that are assessed to the property.
So what's the gap then? That's maybe what I was missing from the 5.
So my understanding from the assessor's office, so they're taking a satellite image and applying software and showing that there's a half an acre shortage, or just.
Is this the one
it's
where
just barely-
you were doing the fencing? Is that a different one? Okay, I get them all mixed up sometimes.
We see a lot, yeah. No, I remember this one. You've got your driveway and your barn and the land, and then it's just that his property with the landscaping is more than a quarter acre.
And so I've made,
And it's been that way the whole time? That's interesting.
so no change.
That's
And
the-
and so
that's the hiccup.
Yeah.
to the county attorneys, so whether we call it an approval mistake or correction or whatever terminology would be appropriate to use, and the language just described of when is the county able to make a correction and not be holden to prior approvals, and the reverse of that particular argument is if there is a correction necessary, am I the one to pay the rollback tax for the correction that's not
The
mine?
previous owner for years that you didn't own the property.
And so the correction would become from the prior owner and from the actual assessor's office. And so is it appropriate for me to be beholden to the rollback tax for a correction or not? So that's one question to ask. And I hope that's the
And that's where
last,
we could abate that. We could,
I hope that's the last issue to actually
Yeah.
even resolve. That's not my primary issue to resolve, because my primary intent is to continue the agricultural purpose and intent of the ground. And I'm here today. So I did receive a call saying, well, we're going to defer yours because of the Urban Farm Act, but I wanted to come today to confirm what are my actual options to continue and pursue.
I think the only option as far as actually getting Greenbelt, you've got 2 options for that. One is going to be to purchase more land.
Okay?
Or one of them is half your yard would have to go back into farming production, right? So unless you take half your yard and put it back into farming production or purchase more land, you don't meet the minimum land requirement. So prior to the satellite technology, the previous owner would have just basically said, oh yeah, my yard's only a quarter acre, when really it was 3/4 of an acre. So, so basically on their application, they were not forthright on their previous application on how much of their land was actually in landscaped.
So may I ask a really specific question then? So if I'm trying to raise grass-fed beef, what I need to do is tear up my grass to plant field grass? Is that effectively what you're
You
saying?
just fence it off.
Yeah, I mean, instead of like a soft Kentucky bluegrass, you'd have like a field grass. If it's for beef, right? If that's
Sure.
what you're
Sure.
doing. If it was orchard, then you would have,
Some-
primary orchard. Yeah.
Right. So I believe, and please clarify and validate for me that with the existing parcel, if there is a change in the actual grass and the fencing, that I could still approve for Greenbelt. Another option is additional land. Another option is urban farm with the
With the irrigation.
stipulations of acquiring the irrigation and complying in that from 1 to 4.9, that I'm already in that minus the irrigation.
Right.
And am I correct in saying those are the options?
They are, and I think though that Paul, you might have to clarify at what meeting that can be accomplished. Could all that be accomplished within a Board of Equalization meeting?
Well, if you had the irrigation, that you'd qualify for the urban farming right now. Right?
Right.
If you had if you bought additional land. that
Right, so if
could
he got
be-
the irrigation, we'd be looking at possibly converting to the urban farm, and then he'd fall into the same sort of category as numbers 3 and 4. And was there going to be anyway, we haven't quite worked out the complete process to transition from Greenbelt to urban farming yet. That's why we continued 3 and 4.
Yeah, we're working on that.
But,
The question is the rollback. That's always the rollback, right?
right, yeah, the question is the
So
rollback,
Can the
so,
rollback be taken care of with any of those options within this meeting?
well, I mean, if he were to purchase, so if he were to stay in Greenbelt, that's where it gets a little bit fuzzy, and I'd probably encourage him to work with Diane. I'm not sure how, if he bought a quarter acre, or if he, went into his property, or, whatever solution he was
Yeah, if
thinking
any of
about
those,
along those lines.
And if any of those occurred, then
We do that in this meeting.
then you could grant his appeal, possibly, again, I don't want to put a decision into your minds, but that would be done at this meeting.
yeah, we could do that in this meeting.
If it were to go with an urban farm, if he applied and he was accepted, then you'd probably deny this appeal, and we'd work through some sort of a green folder process on that in a commission meeting.
And that would be a commission meeting.
I think for Diane and for Chris, if that was to happen where there was another purchase of another half an acre or fenced off differently, do you think that this could be resolved within this meeting?
If he had 5 acres,
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah?
Chris
Okay.
is saying yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So back, Commissioner Gardner, to your question of time. I'm not exactly sure so in my mind, the purchase of the 5 acres is probably the longest of the various options. While I work on all the options, I'm not exactly sure an appropriate amount of time to defer based on all the options, or that one that I perceive as the longest. Do you have a recommendation?
I would just recommend that we put it on the next agenda meeting and you let us kind of know where we're at.
Okay,
Yeah, so that'd be June 23rd, and then you would let us know where you're at.
thank you for your time.
So do you want to make a
That
motion?
was,
with that?
what number is that? Number 5?
5.
So I'll make a motion that we continue number 5 to the next meeting.
So June 23rd, I'll second that motion.
23rd.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 2-0. Item number 6, approve or deny application for review of Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act status for Casalaspro, Javier, and Katia.
This one's continued.
Just a reminder, you've got number 2 sitting out in the wing still. But
Yeah, and if that's ready and you want to go back, we can
Yeah,
work
are we
on that
ready
one.
for that one right now?
Yeah, we got the technical issues cleared up, and so.
Okay, let's go
anytime-
back to item number 2 then.
Yep.
Sorry.
that could be really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, item number 2, Vicky, do you want to give us a review of that? And then we'll ask Kelly to follow up.
Okay, can people hear me?
We can.
Okay, so this is a property that was continued from last month. The LDS Church got their the building permit to start the temple that's being built in Linden. And so Kelly Taylor, who represents the church, she's online. If you have further questions on it.
I don't have any problems with approving this. I just want to make sure that, part of it was to have Kelly online, especially for a new application.
I didn't even know what it was
And so I
for,
just
but now
want
I
to
know
make
it's the
sure that-
temple in Linden.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that Kelly had that opportunity. That's one of the things that we look to is for new applications to have the individual here. So thank you for being here and maybe speak to it.
We re-speak. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. When I received the building permit, I asked if we could file on the property tax exemption. I was given the go-ahead, so I submitted. I think you have everything. The building actually had a site plan, and just hoping to get exemption on that new construction.
Okay, and you understand that it'll be prorated correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I know you were very busy. They said that you're all over the place back in New York and everywhere else, so thanks for joining us on Zoom.
Actually, tending grandkids in Arizona today.
Okay,
So
all right.
crazy.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll make a motion that we approve item number 2 as stated on our regular agenda.
I will second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 2-0. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Vicki. All right, now we'll go to item number 6.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Ben Stanley from the County Attorney's Office. This item was continued from our last meeting, and it's similar to the next two that we'll look at as well. So just to tee it up that way, and maybe to give a little bit of background, one of the things we've talked about in the past is that the Assessor's Office has a statutory and a constitutional duty under the Utah Constitution, Article 13, Section 2, to make sure that the tax structure is fair. And so that's why we are careful when it comes to whether or not things and parcels actually qualify for Greenbelt. In this particular property, the assessor's analyst has not seen production on the property in the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. We can have her talk to that a little bit, but the applicant has said that fires that went through the area and other issues have caused those, particularly 2 fires in the years 2019 and 2020 have caused the problem with the lack of production. What we would urge the board to keep in mind is that there really are a number of requirements to be eligible for Greenbelt. As we've talked about the 5 acres in production, the idea of active devotion to agricultural production, the reasonable expectation of profit, and the obligation to have the measurable production, which is typically measured in animal units per month or sales of agricultural products, that kind of thing. And so when there's not that agricultural production during 3 years, we look to section 92 or 59-2-503, which talks about that waiver. We were just talking about the 1-year waiver. And what the state code says is that the waiver is possible when there's been a submission of proof that the land was assessed on the basis of agricultural use for at least the last 2 years immediately preceding the tax year where you're granting the waiver, and the failure to meet the agricultural production requirements for that tax year was due to no fault or act of the owner, purchaser, or lessee. And so in this particular property, and we'll get into a little more detail here in a second, but the position of the assessor's office is that here there's not been a demonstration that all of the indicia you would expect of active devotion to agricultural production hasn't occurred in the 2 years prior to the years being sought for that waiver. And when you're asking for 3 consecutive years, the standards of practice would suggest that that's not the best way to approach that. So Diane, do you want to come up and talk a little bit about what you've seen? And then I think the applicants are here as well, and we can give them some time to talk about this one as well.
So basically, when we're talking about this, we are talking all 3 of these appeals because they're all right next to each other. They're all a part of the same subdivision.
Okay.
So they're all on West Mountain. They're very nice. They look towards the lake, so they're up on the hill. Do you know where there's in between the 2 the orchards? Okay.
By Lincoln Beach.
Yeah, by Lincoln Beach, right? Just the point,
Right.
whatever. So they're all the same. West Mountain has a fire on it every year. It's whether it takes up the whole West Mountain or it only burns a little portion. They have fires every year due to target shooting and other irresponsible activity that triggers that. It's
I had very high homeowners and fire insurance when I was in West Mountain. So I totally understand. I used to see them all around me all the time.
yeah. West Mountain always has a fire.
We maxed out our fire insurance.
So definitely something to consider, but also as you pointed out, as a homeowner, then you would take precautions so that your place doesn't burn every year. So previous to this subdivision being divided up into lots, it was all one parcel, and it was grazed by Evan Johnson. He grazed cattle on it, and then he subdivided it and sold off these parcels. Since it has been subdivided, he has not grazed his cattle on it, and so each individual owner has had to meet the requirements, which none of them have. So they all got rolled back. Some of them have appealed. Some of them have just paid the rollback and admitted that it's going to take them quite a few years to get that up and running because they're trying to build their home, and that's their priority, and then they'll worry about getting agricultural production later. So one of the applicants here, the Sticklands, mentioned that they had spoken with Brady Kelsey from the State Tax Commission. And so, and Brady had referred them to that 1-year waiver due to no fault of your own, which would be a fire. And so I called Brady to ask for more direction and more specification because my understanding was it's a 1-year waiver. And he said that is correct. So you would not be granted a 3-year waiver waiting for the land to be ready or whatever. You would, after a fire, you would need to do whatever you needed to do, reseed, rebuild fences, whatever was needed. He also reminded me that when the fires came through, you know, all the mountains and everything, and did cause a lot of damage, did actually burn livestock and everything, but the next year, they actually have a surplus and a greater growth because all the new growth. And it's actually a higher quality year the year after a fire. But of course, you have to take advantage of the spring growth, and you know, it's management, it's land management. So,
They
so that's,
reseeded. They reseeded.
and some areas, yeah, they reseed, they do, you know, they do aerial,
Fences.
yeah, they do aerial reseeding, they fix fences, they repair, they make it back so that they can get their production. So, so he says it is a 1-year waiver when there is something due to no fault of their own. So, so I was glad to get that clarification. That's how I thought it was, but he reaffirmed that. Also, Mr. Stickland talked to someone in Tooele County who does Greenbelt, and they referred him to the same part in code where due to no fault of your own, you can get a waiver. And so that is also a 1-year waiver, and they reminded him about reseeding and rebuilding fences and doing what you can to mediate the damage that was caused by what all farmers have to deal with from time to time as things beyond their control. So, so all 3 applicants have said that there has not been production and that it's been because of the 2 fires and because of the drought. And so, so it's based on there is no production. They do have 5 acres.
Do they have, does the land have any irrigation on it?
They have water rights. I don't know what each one, if they're all the same. I know that prior to this, that Evan Johnson pumped out of Utah Lake for irrigation. Prior to Evan Johnson owning this property, it was an orchard. It was actually an apple orchard. And when he purchased it, or maybe the person before him purchased it and then he purchased it afterwards, they no longer used it as an orchard, but the orchard trees were still sitting there. And so McMullins filed a complaint with the Department of Agriculture because when you leave apple trees unkept, they are a magnet for pests that then, you know, infiltrate the adjacent orchards. So they were required to tear down there. So they got a tractor and they tore up all those. For a long time, they sat in big piles of just old trunks and branches, and then eventually Evan burned them all off. So at one point, it was a flourishing orchard, and then cattle grazing, and then now it's these individual lots.
Can you do a timeline for us on this? Can you say 2 fires? So
My
can you go through the
understanding,
timeline?
2019 and 2020.
Okay.
I talked to the wildland fire crews, and they could not get me a map as to where the Goose Point fire burned, which was the biggest one. And that one started like back behind Genola and burned. So, and burned over, because that's the one that went by the observatory that they were fighting to make sure it did not hit the BYU observatory.
And this is being pulled off because of production,
Correct.
not acreage.
Correct.
And it's pulled off of production because 19 was a fire, 20 was a fire.
Well, I pulled it off for production just because there was no production.
Yeah, I know.
And that they
I'm just
couldn't
trying to see where.
They couldn't show production, so they're claiming they can't produce because of the fire in 2019, the fire in 2020. Most of them purchased the property in 2020. So the year before they purchased it, it had burned. And then in 2021, there has not been any production. So 3 years.
So I'm trying to look at the 1 year. So if you have a fire in 19, does that go into 2020, and then you have another fire and you have another 1 year and it goes
Yeah,
into
see, that's what I
2021?
asked Brady, and he said, no, you don't keep getting the 1 year because some areas then would never produce. So it's all management to keep that going. So if they had a fire 2 years in a row, they wouldn't necessarily get 2 years waiver. It's a 1 year waiver.
How does that seem fair?
However you want to look at
I was gonna
that.
say, I mean, if you have an orchard and you have a late frost 2 years in a row, you can't control that your trees didn't produce fruit 2 years in a row. So I don't know if I
But the
necessarily
trees
agree with
are
that.
producing. So another thing, just for some information that might help. So every year, the State Tax Commission, they have their committee that comes up with the value for all the different land classifications. So a lot of statisticians, farmers, Department of Agriculture people, and Farm Bureau members. And so when they do it specifically for each county based on the land type. So when there is that late frost and they've got all the blossoms on the tree and they lose their fruit, the next year the value per acre for irrigated land is lower. That's how because they weren't able to have a production. So it's not like the county assessor greenbelt person would say, oh, you have 500 trees sitting there and they lost all their apples and so you're kicked off greenbelt. That doesn't happen because the trees are still there, they're being managed, there was a reasonable expectation of profit, but a frost, an unpredictable thing, but they don't give you a waiver the next year to not have to produce anything. What they do is the value per acre for orchard 1, 2, 3, or 4 is lower because of that. They do the same thing for drought, same
You're still
thing.
watering the trees and you're still pruning the trees.
Right, you're still spraying them, you're still managing them, and you are doing it with a reasonable expectation of profit, even though Mother Nature dealt you a blow.
So how do you do that with a fire? How do you? I mean, unless you had the fire and you're saying, okay, it's gonna rest 1 year so the soil can regenerate, and
Which
as
most
you,
people would reseed and not necessarily just rest, but
yeah. Okay, and then they turn right around, and let's say they try
another
to
fire.
reseed, and all of a sudden they have another fire, and whatever seed was there is gone again. Doesn't matter. They're just going to be kicked off because there's no production.
I mean, I talked to Wildland when I was out trying to get a map from them, and they were saying, well, when you live in areas like that, you need to have a buffer, around your property where, it's down to soil, so fires can't jump the line as easily. I mean, I don't know, it's part of management. But State Tax
A
Commission
lot of
said
times
1
after
year.
a fire, you have a flood.
I know.
And
And that does happen.
The fire happens, it takes all the brush away, and then here comes the water, and it just rips your land apart. And now you've got there are two different incidences that happen. They're completely out of your control. And we're saying that we have 1 year no matter what.
What the code says, again, and I'll read this, and I read it a minute ago, but the code says,
I'm with you on this.
submission of proof that the land was assessed on the basis of agricultural use for at least 2 years immediately preceding that tax year of the waiver. And so it says assessed on the basis of, and so one could make the argument that it may have been assessed as greenbelt, even if it wasn't actually productive those years. But what Diane is saying is that the State Tax Commission's auditor and the standards of practice and the trainings that they do suggest that they look at for a single year. I think in practical terms, if somebody had actually had crops get scorched and you could see the crops and see that they had invested, seeing that they were trying and it got scorched on that very parcel of land.
You
and
have
those-
receipts of seeding or.
You'd have all the receipts, you'd say, yep, they're actively devoted, that was a 1 year waiver through no fault of their own. If it happened the next year and they paid for more seeds and they planted again and it got scorched again, I don't think anybody would take them off of Greenbelt. But when there's none of the indicia to say for multiple years, these different kinds of 1 year waivers should justify remaining on Greenbelt. That's what the assessor's office has looked at and said, we don't see it. We appreciate the argument, but we just don't see it that way.
So you're saying that we should try to weigh it based off of that. So if there has been, because again, the Farmland Assessment Act is really to protect farmers, right? We get that, and so it's the farmer mentality. So if you get 1 year with a fire, of course you don't know you're going to get another one the next year. You're going to start something. You're going to do something, and whatever that something is what you're saying that we need to look at to weigh it against.
Right.
And if we see something where we say, hey, you know what, they're trying to act like they're getting back into the farming, and then I have another fire, that may be a circumstance for us to say, okay, we need to take that in consideration.
Right. And along those lines, then for 2021, they're claiming a drought, and we're in a drought. So I asked the State Tax Commission about that. Are we getting a lot of farmers now using that 1 year waiver because of drought? Because, I need to know that. And he said in the whole state there has been no one, because farmers don't just say, oh, and then give up. They buy more water rights, they rotate, they change maybe what they're growing that's maybe more drought tolerant. They do something because they need an income, because their land is their income. So that's the guidance I got for drought conditions. And again, the state lowers the per acre land value per the land classification based on drought years. And when it's extreme drought, grazing goes down, dry tillable land goes down in value, and that's how they compensate for some of those unforeseen things that farmers have to deal with, mostly the weather.
So what you're saying by that is that the measurement is different when you go out there to measure for production, because the measurement now has been lowered to a standard in which it should have some sort of production off of it.
Correct.
Got it.
Less bellies to feed or something.
Yeah.
So unless there's any other questions about the legal issues, we'll let the applicants talk about their land.
Talk now?
Yep, come on up.
Sorry. We just wanted to say a couple things. First, we bought the land in June 2020, and the second fire hit on August 2020. And so we didn't plant anything, obviously, but we did drill a well, a really big one, and we put a lot of fencing all around the place. We built an entrance for, the cattle to come in and out and all those things. So we probably didn't do anything on the actual, we actually graded the whole land too.
So you graded it and put in fencing?
Yes, and the well.
And the well.
Now we're getting a permission from, or I don't know if it's called that way. We're talking to SCSD to get the power in so we can put the pump and then get water. So we're actually working towards having a farm over there. We're not there yet, but we're working towards it. Now, I honestly didn't know that I was actually supposed to work on the land, and all these things that I was going to do to prepare the land were not going to qualify us for Greenbelt. But we did do it. So I just wanted to explain to you guys what we did and see if there's anything we can do to qualify still and to keep working towards having a farm over there. We're willing to do whatever you ask us to, but, we're actually new to this too, so.
How much land is it? Is it just 5 acres?
5 acres and a quarter.
5 and a quarter?
Yeah.
Are you going to be building a home?
We're planning on only a quarter, because that's what we're allowed.
Right.
But not right now.
What type of farming would you consider doing on the land until you build a home?
Well, we wanna have some peaches and some, small apples and stuff like that, and maybe put a couple animals. We're not necessarily focused on one, but we're exploring it. Now, I don't know if we do animals, if we're still qualified, if we have a minimum requirement, or if we put, certain, certain plants over there, if you want to call it that, or trees, you know, we'll do whatever we need to do to qualify, because, you know, we need this. So we're willing to work.
Okay. So obviously it's, you know, the 5.25 acres. Are you looking at getting some reasonable, so are you going to sell this product? I mean, in the future, you're planning on selling
Yeah.
it?
Apple pies
Apple,
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I would like to.
small
Very
things.
small.
I don't think that we're gonna go to Walmart and sell them, you know, cherries or stuff. But
Well, and, I mean, to qualify for fruit, you would have to have quite a bit of fruit,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I struggled to qualify at 2,500 pounds a year.
oh, wow.
So, I mean, when I had my 5.75 acres, we did, like I said, a minimum 2,500 pounds of cherries a year, plus we had multiple other, and we barely qualified.
There's a formula. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
look at it and see.
Now, we had a lot of people that asked us to rent the place to take their cattle over there and, you know, graze it and stuff. I think that the grass that is growing over there is not good for the animals.
For the horses.
They
told us-
said that for the horses is not very good because it gets stuck on their tongue, and, you know, and so we're trying to fix that too. But again, we don't want to put animals in, you know, danger if we don't have the right thing for them. So that's why we didn't get anything in there.
Foxtails?
Yeah.
Love foxtails.
Stick to everything.
I know.
Can I help them?
Yeah.
Can I come up?
Yeah.
Let me.
When you come up, just tell us your name.
Chris Calton, we're the next one.
Okay.
I want to thank Mrs. Garcia for sharing about the West Mountain fires. When I filed these documents, I filed the pictures of those fires. Do you have those documents that shows the pictures? Each year that those fires came, it wiped out those areas, and those pictures show that. Not only did we have fire, it shows in one of those pictures that we have that actually the fire crews came in on our property with their bulldozers, their fire trucks, and ruined a lot of that property because they had to put those fires out. And then they also cut a fire break on the property. And not only do they do that, they do the fire retardant. So they drop that from the airplane. So who's going to have grass grazed or a crop planted when you have fire retardant on your property? And so this happened consecutively. And so then we had another camera on the property the next year. And again, and this is validated, this is true, there's another fire. It was incredible what was happening. And I have pictures also of the grass. It is just totally brown. And I thought, how in the heck can we produce anything on this property? And the previous owner, and I had seen it, had tons of cattle on the property. And so when they contacted Heather Garcia, in their conversation, she said, yes, it was grazing. When we received the documents, it said it was cropland. And so I was confused if it was either grazing or cropland that had been done. And she had assessed us with cropland on those affidavits. And then I received a letter from Evan Johnson stating, and she's read this, that actually the property for the last 10 or 15 years was used for grazing. And so I had to validate to make sure, like this other individual that was here previous was trying to figure out what the property was used for. Because when you buy property, you're almost caught in a situation where what did the previous guy do? And if he was dishonest, then we're punished for his dishonesty. And that's wrong. And so another brother that was here, when he did everything he could do to show you that he had done everything right, and then he's blamed or punished financially for something that somebody had done in the past, in my opinion, is incorrect. And as a commission, my feeling for him was, you need to do what's right for him. Now going back to this, and so for years, this property was, as Mrs. Garcia said, it was stunning. And those pictures of those fires, I remember a client we'd built a house for said, what do we do? Our house is going to be burnt down. The fire's over 6,000 acre feet. And then the next year it burns again. And I thought to myself, what have I done? Who would want to be here out there in this property? Since that time, it's not just seeding the property. In fact, when she was talking about Stickland, it wasn't Stickland, it was me. I'd contacted Brady Kessley, talked to him multiple times, but I also had to go outside the county because I wanted information. For some reason, I wasn't able to talk to Diane Garcia, so I contacted Wasatch County. I contacted Tooele County and different counties that did the Greenbelt. And every county was a little bit different. And so I was stunned by how the application was done. And so I got a hold of Tooele County, and that's what Mrs. Garcia was quoting. And I was the guy that had done that. And I've had 4 or 5 conversations with that department. They didn't know that I didn't have property in their area, but they were so willing to give me the information I needed in such a kind manner. And she said, as mentioned on the phone call, when you fill out your affidavit, if you include a statement regarding the fire, which I did on the affidavit to Mrs. Garcia, with any evidence showing the property was used agriculturally, what you are doing to remedy and improve the property so you can use agriculture again should be sufficient. That includes fencing or anything cleaning up. For example, any receipts, reseeding, fencing, repair, water, ditch remediation to show you're trying to start using it again, which we did. Now, if there's a fire again the next year, how?
Right.
And you produce anything. And in 1 year example, it isn't correct what she said, because when I contacted again Tooele County, they said it was more than a year. And so I didn't understand what she was saying, but I love what she said. And I was sitting behind her, actually, and she was talking to this man right here. She said, a picture tells 1,000 words. And I heard exactly what she said. And so we produced all these pictures. And the pictures that we produced are true. And I can show you this. So this is a vicinity map that shows our property. And it shows all the property around it in trees. But for some reason, this piece is brown, and I don't understand. That's off the Google. Since this has happened, there's cattle grazing on our property. We have 31 head.
Is that this year?
Right, yes, right now. We have it's a huge piece of property. And so we've gone through and have done all the fencing. Reseeding in a drought doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We need to be common sense. And so we have tried everything we could do. But then there's one other situation that occurs that has affected everyone in this room. That's COVID. COVID was real, and it affected our lives. Unfortunately for me, my wife had brain surgery. And I have a picture of that where she took off 3¼ inches out of her skull with a tumor. I also have a special needs son who has brain trauma. COVID affected me tremendously. It shut down a lot of things that I had to do. I had to make a decision, which I did, to protect my family first and to exclude all the children, all the events, and all the different things I did to make it through that event so I could be here today with her and him. It's affected a lot of my friends. And even this last year, one of my best friends died of COVID. And so as I looked at these specific things, I had to make decisions, not on money and not on crops, but on living. But that property, when I go after that property, it brings me peace. And I've enjoyed fencing the property. I have a fence, not only my own property, I fence across the Stricklands, the Williamsons and others, put gates in that property and put cattle on that property. So that property is 100% greenbelt. And we've done it even after all the affliction that's come upon us. And we're asking for mercy. It has been an incredible time for each of us. And I can share other things, but it's unnecessary. But today, that's why we're here, to have that opportunity. And I can show you those pictures that the cattle is out there grazing on that ground. And a lot of work and preparation has gone into that over the last couple of years for me to lift that property from the drought and the fire and everything else. Mrs. Garcia actually knows about this property. In a letter, in a conversation to one of the people here, if they want to share it, she specifically mentioned the property in the condition that it was in the past. And I don't know if I even want to share the letter or what she said, but she condemned it. And I'll let the brother here, Scott, address it if he wants to. But even with the Greenbelt assessment and the supervisor going against us, we believe that at this meeting today, that you will let us move forward to not only have those to whom are there now, but for grandchildren who go out and want to be a part of the cattle and to be able to barter. And are we doing it for increase? Yes. But it affects all those properties. And another thing happened with this Greenbelt. Every notice that was sent out was not received by the county, by the individuals. In fact, Lot 4, the Williamsons, when she sent out to the Greenbelt to receive, to comply to the assessment, they never received the document. And then about 2 weeks ago, they said, Chris, we never received this document, but they've taken our property and put it back out of Greenbelt. So part of this, too, is for me, is to say how in the future, not only for us, but for other people, if a document's sent out by the county and not responded to, the assumption is then by the county that they haven't decided to reply, but yet they're punished for not replying, and yet they didn't have the opportunity to reply. There needs to be some kind of system that if something's sent out, that should be able to send a document back to the county that they have received that document. And this has happened to the Williamson family. And I know specifically because he mentioned this to me. Do you have any questions for me?
Not necessarily questions, but Mr. Strickland, right? Is that right?
I'm Mr. Cowden.
Mr. Cowden.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm number 7.
I didn't know which. I think that I want to just kind of display a little bit of dilemma. I truly believe that this commission wants to do all that we can to allow, I think, what you're looking to have happen. But, and you may be looking at this commission as if the commission can make decisions up here unilaterally and they'll stick permanently. And it's just, it may and it may not. And I'll kind of demonstrate to you. So in this meeting, the Board of Equalization meeting, we have a fence around us that we have to stay within. And if we stay within that fence and make decisions within it, which has already been set up, if we make those decisions, then it's not further appealable or criticized. But if we start to make decisions outside of those boundaries, then it can be appealed, and it can be appealed by the assessor's office and others to go to the state. And I'll tell you, in the past, when we have done that and it's been appealed and it's gone to the state, for the most part, we lose. I don't know if we've ever won. Has a commission ever won, Paul?
Anytime that we have.
We've usually always lost at the state appeal side, because I think what you're talking about is you're talking about some, I'll call it common sense and mercy and just understanding. And I think that's what we want to give, but it's hard to give it within the parameters of the box that we're in, because if we do and it goes to the state, I've never seen them look at it that way. It's usually pretty black and white all the way through. So I put it this direction because there is options for us as a commission, and that is that in this meeting, if we were and maybe maybe if we could take a 5-minute recess?
I was actually going to say that as well. I want to take a 5-minute recess, see what our options are, and then come back. And so if you guys want to give us...
Will you give us 5 minutes?
Just 5 minutes so we can discuss and see what our legal options are. Okay, so we're going to take a
Chris, would you be a part of that conversation with us?
Yeah, give us a 5-minute break, and we're going to discuss with the assessor and the attorney and kind of see what our legal options are, and then we'll come back. Okay?
That work? Let's meet in your conference room.